Her wedding was perfect until the Duke betrayed her with her sister. Nightingale Whisperers, Society Paper, April 1813. Dearest readers, it appears that not all love stories conclude with vows and roses. Indeed, some end quite spectacularly, before the ink on the marriage license has even dried. And while London whispers of the grand affair to be held at Fairbourne Manor, the Duke of Greystone's long-awaited union to Lady Helena Worthing, one might do well to remember, perfection is often but a costume, stitched together by pride and desperation. Scene 1. The candlelit rehearsal at Fairbourne Manor. Fairbourne Manor glowed that evening, every chandelier dripping with light, every marble column garlanded in roses. The ballroom smelled of lavender and longing. Lady Helena Worthing stood at the center of it all, her fingers brushing the lace at her wrist as if to steady her racing heart. Tomorrow she would marry a duke. Tomorrow her years of sacrifice, poise, and patience would finally yield their reward. She could already hear the ton's whispers. Helena Worthing, the girl with no dowry but flawless manners, now Duchess of Greystone. She smiled softly at the thought. At least she tried to. From across the hall, the Duke himself, Nicholas Hawthorne, dark-haired and dangerously composed, watched her with an unreadable expression. He was, by all accounts, everything a mother might wish for her daughter. Rich, titled, devastatingly handsome. Yet there lingered in his eyes a distance Helena could never quite bridge. "Your Grace," she said when he approached. "You've scarcely smiled all evening. Is the prospect of marrying me truly so dreadful?" He chuckled, polite but detached. "Not dreadful, my lady. Only overwhelming." Helena tilted her head. Overwhelming is a word one uses for grief, not love. But before he could reply, her sister appeared, Lydia Worthing, radiant in cream satin, the very image of effortless charm. Lydia, who had always walked through life as if the world existed merely to admire her. "Helena, dearest," she sang, looping her arm through the Duke's. "We were just discussing tomorrow's procession. Shall we rehearse the order once more?" Helena's smile faltered, but she nodded. "Of course." The orchestra began a soft waltz. The guests clapped. Helena moved through the steps, her every motion measured and perfect. But when she caught the Duke's eyes upon Lydia, lingering too long, too tenderly, something inside her quivered like a candle in the wind. And though no one else saw it, Nightingale Whisperers certainly did. A bride's smile may be rehearsed, dear readers, the narrator would later write, but her instincts never are. Scene 2. The Corridor Discovery. The guests departed near midnight, leaving the manor dim and echoing with laughter that had already faded into memory. Helena dismissed her maid and walked the corridors alone, the silk of her gown whispering over the floors. Tomorrow, she told herself again. Tomorrow her life begins. But fate, as it happens, had other plans. She turned a corner and froze. There, half hidden in the shadows of the conservatory, she saw them, her Duke, her sister. Their silhouettes were unmistakable, close, far too close, until the soft sound of a kiss broke the air like a knife through glass. Helena did not breathe. She could not. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Lydia's laughter, quiet and guilty, was followed by Nicholas's voice, low, torn. "You should not have come, Lydia. And yet you cannot resist me," she whispered. Helena's hands trembled violently. She wanted to step forward, to confront them, to shatter the fragile lie her life had become. But something held her still. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps disbelief. Or perhaps the cruel truth that she had always known. Deep down, this love was borrowed, not given. Tears gathered but did not fall. She turned and fled, her slippers silent on the marble. "There are betrayals, dear readers, that burn like fire," Nightingale Whisperers would later remark. and then there are those that freeze the soul instead. Scene 3. The confrontation deferred. The next morning dawned gray, as if the heavens themselves mourned. Helena sat before her mirror, her wedding gown spread like snowfall around her. The maids fluttered about, pinning curls, fastening jewels. But all she saw in the glass was a stranger. The same smile, the same poise. Only her eyes had changed. When Lydia entered without knocking, Helena did not turn. "You should not be here," she said, voice low. Lydia hesitated. "Helena, please." "It was nothing." Helena rose slowly, her reflection splitting into two in the glass, the dutiful sister and the woman undone. "Nothing?" she whispered. "You call the ruin of my heart nothing?" Lydia's lip quivered. "He loves you. He only—" "Don't lie to me, Lydia. Not today." For a long moment they stood in silence, two women bound by blood and betrayal. Finally, Helena's voice steadied. "You will say nothing of this. The ceremony proceeds as planned." Lydia gasped. "You cannot mean to—" "I mean to protect our family's name," Helena said. "If society must gossip, let it be about my composure, not your shame." "Oh, what an actress our Lady Worthing would have made," Whistledown's quill would later gleam, had her stage not been the altar itself. Scene 4. The moment before the fall. The church bells tolled. The crowd gathered. The Duke stood at the altar, tall and composed, every inch the groom of perfection. Helena walked down the aisle like a vision sculpted from grace itself. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. Her father's hand trembled on her arm. Her veil shimmered with pearls that now felt unbearably heavy. She met Nicholas's gaze, calm, cold, guilt-ridden, and smiled as if she'd never seen him before. "Do you, Lady Helena Worthing, take this man?" Her voice caught. The world blurred, and in that moment, something inside her broke cleanly in two. She looked past Nicholas to Lydia in the pews, pale and trembling, and saw in her sister's eyes the confession no words could carry. Helena's lips parted, but no sound came. She turned sharply, her gown sweeping like a storm as she fled the aisle, gasps chasing her like echoes. And so it was, Nightingale whisperers would later write, that the most perfect wedding London ever planned became its most delicious scandal. For if love is indeed a battlefield, then Fairbourne's church became its Waterloo. As the carriages scattered and the whispers grew, Nightingale whisperer's pen bled one final truth across her page. In the grand theater of society, it is not the first kiss that defines a woman's fate, but the moment she dares to walk away. Part 2. Dearest reader, it seems the grand affair of the Fairbourne wedding was not as splendid as the Tun had hoped. Whispers travel faster than carriage wheels, and they say the bride smiled so perfectly that no one noticed her heart had shattered just hours before she took her vows. But do not be deceived. Behind every serene duchess lies a story of quiet ruin and unyielding strength. Nightingale Whisperers, Society Papers. The night before the wedding, the Fairbourne Manor glittered like an illusion. Gold-trimmed candles shimmered against marble columns, laughter filled the corridors, and the orchestra tuned its violins in the ballroom. It was the sort of beauty one could almost believe in, if not for the silence between the sisters. Lady Helena stood before her mirror, her reflection ghost-like under the soft glow. Her gown hung ready on its mannequin. Silk, the color of moonlight, pearls scattered like fallen tears along the bodice. Every stitch was perfect, every fold divine. Yet her hands trembled as she adjusted her necklace, as if the jewels weighed heavier than they should. Downstairs, the household buzzed in preparation for the Duke of Ashbourne's arrival. Her father, Lord Fairbourne, barked instructions with a trembling authority. He was desperate to see his family's fortunes restored. The Duke's union meant salvation, Their estate had been on the brink of ruin for years. "Helena," came a soft, lilting voice from the doorway. She didn't turn immediately. That voice, she could recognize it even in her sleep. Lady Lillian, her younger sister, the one with sunlit curls and a smile that had always drawn every man's gaze. "You should rest," Helena murmured, forcing her tone calm. "Tomorrow will be long." Lillian entered, the scent of rosewater trailing behind her. "I couldn't sleep. I thought perhaps we could talk as we used to." Helena met her gaze through the mirror. As we used to. Before everything changed. Before she'd overheard her groom whispering Lillian's name in the shadowed corridor of Ashbourne Hall. "I'm afraid we've said all that needed saying," Helena replied, her voice cool, her chest tight. Lillian hesitated. "You mustn't think ill of him, Helena, or of me. Things simply happened." The words sliced deeper than any blade. "Things?" Helena turned now, slow and deliberate. "You call it a thing, Lillian? You call my fiancé's betrayal, your betrayal, something that simply happened?" Tears shimmered in Lillian's eyes, but Helena saw no remorse, only fear. "I didn't mean for you to find out. Adrian thought what?" Helena's voice trembled, rising. "That I would marry him blindly? That my silence was his convenience?" "Please," Lillian whispered. "He will still marry you, for the family's sake, for your father's peace. But you must know he loves me." "Enough." Helena's voice broke like glass. Not another word. For a heartbeat the sisters stared at each other, the fallen angel and the one who had been left to bear her sins. Then Helena turned away. "Leave me, Lillian." Lillian hesitated at the door, guilt flickering in her eyes. "You're stronger than me," she said softly. "You always have been." When the door closed, Helena sank to her knees, the weight of every secret pressing her down. Her chest heaved, but no tears came. Only silence. Only the quiet promise forming in her heart. She would not let them see her break. By morning, the manor transformed into a spectacle of grandeur. The Duke of Ashbourne arrived in polished black carriages, his crest gleaming gold in the sunlight. Adrian Hawthorne, the man every mother desired for her daughter. His poise was unshakable, his voice smooth as silk, his reputation flawless. He bowed to Lord Fairbourne, to the assembled guests, to the whispers of admiration that followed him. But when his eyes met Helena's across the room, a flicker of unease crossed his expression. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the Duke's practiced smile. "Lady Helena," he said, his tone too formal, too cold. "You look exquisite." "Thank you, Your Grace," she replied, her voice like frost on glass. Their gazes held. The orchestra began to play softly. The crowd moved around them like an ocean of lace and powdered wigs, and yet she could see it in his eyes. The guilt, the longing that wasn't for her. Still, she smiled. She had learned early that a woman's smile could be armor. Hours later, the rehearsal dinner unfolded with calculated elegance. Guests toasted to love and prosperity. Helena lifted her glass, her lips curving just enough to satisfy the watching eyes. She spoke little, listening instead. Every word, every pause, every careless slip. Adrian sat beside her, Lillian across the table, and though propriety demanded distance, their glances betrayed them. "Your Grace," Lord Fairbourne said, breaking the tension. "It honors our family to see my daughter so well matched. You bring light back to this house." Adrian inclined his head politely. "It is I who am honored, my lord." Helena's fingers tightened around her glass. Light. There was none in her heart, not anymore. Only the cold clarity that came with disillusionment. Later that evening, when the final guest had departed and the manor sank into quiet, Helena wandered toward the chapel at the far end of the grounds. The night air was sharp, scented with rain and garden lilies. She needed silence. She needed air. But as she neared the archway, she heard voices, low, urgent. "You shouldn't be here, Lillian," Adrian whispered. "I had to see you. Just once more before tomorrow," came Lillian's reply. Helena froze in the shadows. "After tomorrow, everything changes," Lillian said, her tone trembling. "You'll belong to her." A pause, the soft sound of movement. "Lillian," Adrian said, voice low. "You know my heart has always been yours." The kiss was faint, a rustle in the dark, but it struck Helena like a thunderclap. Her hand gripped the stone pillar to keep from falling. The world blurred. The chapel bells tolled midnight, solemn and cruel. For a moment, she could not breathe. Then something inside her hardened, like steel forged in fire. She turned and walked away, each step deliberate, her pulse deafening. She did not cry. She would not. Tomorrow, she would walk down that aisle, not for love, but for survival. And she would not let them see her bleed. By dawn, her resolve had crystallized. She sat at her dressing table once more, the morning light pale and cold. Her maid laced her gown, and every tug of the corset felt like another vow binding her to her fate. Her father entered briefly, pride and exhaustion mingling in his eyes. "My dear girl," he said, voice thick, "you have saved us all." She smiled faintly. "Yes, father, I suppose I have." The ceremony began with splendor. The choir, the silks, the scent of roses. Every seat in the chapel was filled. Helena walked the aisle with perfect grace, her veil concealing the truth from those who cheered. At the altar, Adrian looked at her, and for an instant, guilt flashed again. But it was too late. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, the applause thundered, and as the choir sang, Helena's gaze swept the crowd, finding Lillian in the third pew, eyes red, face pale. Helena's lips curved slightly, a quiet, tragic smile. She had done what was required. She had preserved her family's name. But as she turned to face the guests as the new Duchess of Ashbourne, her heart whispered the words that would haunt her for years. "I became a duchess that day, but not a wife." Part 3. The kiss was not meant for her eyes, yet it burned itself into her soul. The chapel garden lay cloaked in twilight, roses nodding under the weight of rain. Helena's breath caught as she stepped from the path and saw them. Adrian's hand on Lillian's cheek, his lips descending in a moment so tender it shattered something holy inside her. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. The sound of the choir rehearsing within the chapel faded into nothingness. Only the soft gasp she couldn't contain betrayed her presence. Adrian jerked back, eyes wide. "Helena!" Lillian turned, pale as the marble archway behind her. "It's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. Helena felt the earth tilt beneath her. The scent of lilies, once her favorite, now sickened her. The rain began to fall in earnest, cold and merciless, as if the heavens themselves mourned the moment. Her voice came low, steady, terrifyingly calm. "How long?" "Helena, please, how long?" she repeated, her tone slicing through the air like a blade. Lillian's lips trembled. "Since the summer, before he proposed." A tremor of disbelief passed through Helena, then rage, then nothing at all. She looked at Adrian, tall, noble, the very image of composure crumbling before her. "And you still came to my father. You still—" "I had to," he said hoarsely. "Your family needed your fortune," she finished for him, "and you needed your reputation. So you chose me instead of the woman you actually desired. How noble." Her laugh was soft, hollow. "Well, Your Grace, congratulations. You shall have both, your bride and your lie." She turned and walked away before he could speak again. Rain blurred her vision. but she did not stumble. Inside, something fierce had taken root, a resolve born not of love, but of survival. By dawn, her tears had dried. Her decision was made. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and windswept. The manor bustled with servants, carriages, florists, and whispers. Helena sat by the window, hands clasped in her lap. From the gardens below drifted the sound of musicians tuning their instruments, each note slicing the quiet like a warning. Her maid, Bess, moved around her in nervous silence. "My lady," she whispered finally, "are you well?" Helena smiled faintly at her reflection. "Perfectly well, Bess. A bride should never look otherwise." Yet her eyes betrayed her, clear, cold, and unreadable as polished stone. A knock came. Her father entered, already dressed for the ceremony, his silver hair shining. "Helena, my dear, you're radiant," he said with forced brightness. "The Duke will be proud." "I'm sure he will," she murmured. He hesitated, his pride faltering under her calm. "You've done the right thing. This match, it will restore everything. Our lands, our standing, your future. Our ruin, exchanged for my heart," she thought. "Of course, father," she said softly. "Duty first. Always." He kissed her forehead, unaware of the storm within her, and left. When the door closed, Helena rose and touched the veil laid across her dressing table. Her fingers traced the lace edges as though committing the texture to memory. One last act of innocence before she donned her mask. "Help me dress," she said. Bess obeyed, tightening each ribbon, fastening each pearl, until the gown fit like armor. The fabric shimmered faintly in the dim light, white as winter frost. Helena stood tall, the very image of grace. Only her hands trembled slightly as she took the bouquet. The chapel overflowed with nobility. Candles flickered against vaulted ceilings, casting golden light across silks and jewels. The choir hummed softly as the guests murmured. Every eye turned toward the door where the bride would soon appear. Adrian stood at the altar, his jaw tight. His gaze flickered once toward the pews, where Lillian sat pale and still beside their mother, her gloved hands twisted in her lap. He looked away quickly. When the organ began, the crowd rose as one. Helena appeared in the doorway, serene, ethereal, untouchable. Adrian's breath caught. Each step she took down the aisle echoed through the vast chamber, slow and deliberate, like the ticking of a clock counting down the end of something. He could feel her composure from where he stood. It terrified him. When she reached him, he offered his hand. Her touch was cool, precise, as if the warmth between them had been drained overnight. "Are you ready?" he whispered. Her lips curved. "Of course, Your Grace. I've been ready my whole life." The ceremony began. Words blurred together. Honor, cherish, obey. Helena repeated them flawlessly, her tone steady. Inside, she felt nothing. She watched herself from a distance, as if her soul had left her body somewhere between the corridor and the chapel. When the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," Adrian hesitated. For a fraction of a second, he saw the shadow behind her smile, the truth she would never voice. Their lips touched lightly, and the congregation sighed in delight. Only Helena's pulse knew the truth. She had kissed him goodbye. The reception glittered with excess. Champagne flowed, music soared, and laughter filled every corner of the grand hall. Helena moved among her guests like a ghost in silk, smiling, curtsying, exchanging pleasantries she didn't hear. "Your Grace," one matron simpered, "you've made a splendid match." "Yes," Helena said smoothly. "A match most splendid indeed." Adrian watched her from across the room. She was radiant, untouchable, and yet, he sensed it. The distance, the subtle wall that had risen between them overnight. When he approached her, she turned with practiced grace. "Your Grace." "Helena," he said under his breath, "we need to speak." Later, she replied, sipping her wine. The guests might notice. He frowned. You're angry. Anger implies care, she said lightly. Don't mistake composure for forgiveness. Her eyes met his, steady, clear, unflinching. And for the first time, Adrian felt small. As night fell and the last guests departed, Helena retreated to the balcony overlooking the gardens. The moon was high, the air scented with roses again. She leaned against the balustrade, exhaustion finally breaking through her armor. Behind her, the door opened. Adrian stepped out, his jacket undone, the mask of charm stripped away. Helena. She didn't turn. Shouldn't you be attending to your guests, Your Grace? They're gone, he said quietly. We need to talk. There's nothing left to say. Yes, there is. He came closer, his voice low. I didn't want this to happen like this. I never meant to hurt you. Yet here we are. I thought I could. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I thought I could bury what I felt for her. I thought I could be the man you deserved. Her breath hitched, but she kept her tone cold. And did you? No, he said, honesty breaking through his voice like a crack in glass. But I will try. Helena finally turned. Do not insult me with promises made from guilt. He took a step closer. Then what do you want from me? I want nothing, she said simply, because nothing is what's left between us. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of the wind in the garden filled the silence. Then she turned back toward the moonlit lawn. Tomorrow, I'll move into the East Wing. You'll have the rest of the house to yourself. I imagine it will be easier for both of us. He stared at her, jaw tight. You can't live like this. Watch me. Her voice was quiet, but it carried more power than any shout. When he left, the air seemed colder. Helena stood there long after, her wedding ring catching the light, a circle of gold, perfect and unbroken, and yet utterly hollow. That night, when the manor finally slept, she sat alone at her vanity, hair unpinned, veil discarded. The mirror reflected the Duchess of Ashbourne, flawless, dignified, and utterly unreachable. She lifted her hand, watching the ring gleam against her pale skin. I became a duchess today, she whispered to her reflection. But not a wife. Her voice cracked, barely audible. Not his wife, not anyone's. And somewhere beyond the walls of the grand estate, the bells of Ashbourne tolled softly, marking not the beginning of a marriage, but the burial of a heart. Chapter 4. The silence hurt more than his betrayal. That was the first thought that came to her as the carriage rattled away from London, carrying her far from the scandal she could not bear to face. No cries followed her, no apologies, no explanations. Only the muffled roll of wheels over the cobbled road and the low whimper of the mare pulling them through the mist. Helena sat motionless, gloved hands pressed against her lap, the diamond ring still biting into her finger like a cruel reminder. The carriage windows were veiled with rain, but in every blur of gray sky she saw them, her sister's lips against his. The Duke's hands, once steady and reverent, now trembling as they held another. No amount of distance could silence that image. When they reached Rosefield Manor, the estate her aunt had left her in the country, the air was heavy with early autumn. Fields stretched wide and gold, the scent of cut hay and damp soil clinging to her gown as she stepped down. The servants had been told of her arrival, but not of the reason. She could not bear their pity. Her Grace will take no visitors, she instructed softly. And please, no correspondence from London. They curtsied, murmured their assent, and vanished like shadows. Only when she entered her late aunt's drawing room did Helena allow herself to exhale. The manor was quiet, too quiet, but for the ticking of the old clock above the hearth. Every room smelled faintly of lavender and old pages. Her aunt had been a collector of books, and Helena found herself wandering to the shelves, running her fingers over spines as though they might speak back. How absurd, she thought. That one could envy the peace of the dead. She spent the first days in silence. The staff brought her meals, but she barely touched them. She wrote nothing, spoke to no one. The world outside continued. Gossip papers, carriages, debutantes, and scandal sheets. But she was a ghost among the living. Each morning she walked the estate grounds, the mist curling through the gardens like breath. The roses were wilting. Their petals, soft and dying, reminded her of the bouquet she had dropped on the chapel floor the day she saw them, her groom and her sister, beneath the arch of lilies meant for her. Sometimes she thought she could still smell the lilies. It was on the 5th day that the tears finally came. They started not with sobs but with silence, the kind that cracks open from within. She was reading one of her aunt's old letters when a line stopped her cold. "We are not ruined by the cruelty of others, but by the lies we tell ourselves about our worth." Helena pressed the paper to her lips and wept, soundlessly, helplessly. She wept for her lost illusions, for the laughter she had shared with her sister, for the Duke's gaze that once made her feel chosen. She wept until her chest ached and her hands trembled. And then, slowly, she began to breathe again. That night, she lit a fire in the hearth and sat before it, her nightgown draped around her like fog. The flames blurred as she stared into them, her thoughts whispering back and forth. What now, Helena? What remains when love burns to ash? The next morning, she decided to live differently, not for him, not even for forgiveness, but for herself. She rose early and dismissed her maid's offer to prepare her gown. Instead, she tied her hair back, pulled on her riding cloak, and went out before dawn. The stables were quiet, the horses stirring as she entered. A bay mare, soft-eyed, gentle, turned her head. "Good morning, Iris," Helena murmured, stroking her neck. "Shall we see if the world still exists?" The ride was long, winding through bramble-lined paths and fields shimmering with dew. The wind was sharp but clean, and for the first time, Helena felt something she hadn't in weeks: freedom. When she stopped at the ridge overlooking the river, the sun was just rising. She dismounted and stood there, watching the light spill over the water. It felt like a small mercy, the kind one doesn't earn but is given anyway. She closed her eyes and let the wind tangle her hair. "He cannot take this from me," she thought. "He cannot touch this peace." Yet even in peace, memories found her. She saw his smile, the warmth in his eyes that now felt like deceit. The Duke had not just betrayed her heart, he had betrayed her belief in herself. "Why wasn't I enough?" she whispered to no one. The echo came softly, carried by the river breeze, "because you were too much for a man too small to see it." That thought, fierce and unexpected, stayed with her all day. By evening, she had found a strange rhythm. She began restoring the neglected parts of the manor, opening draped windows, tending to the gardens, cataloging her aunt's books. There was a strange power in order, in creation after ruin. Each small act felt like defiance. On the 7th day, the post arrived. She had forbidden letters, but the butler approached with hesitation. "It was marked urgent, Your Grace," he said, bowing. "From London. The seal bears the Duke's crest." Her stomach turned. She took the letter, her hands cold, and carried it to her study. The wax gleamed dark blue, his color. For a long moment she couldn't bring herself to break it. Then, with a sharp breath, she tore it open. "My dearest Helena, if you will not see me, at least read this. I owe you no defense, only truth. I have brought shame upon you and upon myself. Your sister's actions were not yours to bear, nor was my weakness yours to forgive. But I would sooner live despised by all London than admired by a world that does not know how deeply I regret that day. You deserved loyalty. You deserved love. And God help me, I still..." She stopped reading. The ink blurred with her tears before she even realized she was crying again. She folded the letter carefully, placed it in the fire, and watched it curl into flame. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." Forgiveness was too heavy a gift to give so soon. In the weeks that followed, she began writing in her journal. Not letters to him, but to herself. Reflections, fragments, thoughts she had buried for too long. If I am to be a duchess, let me be one who reigns over her own heart first. If love is to come again, let it find me whole. By the time October arrived, the manor had changed. Laughter sometimes echoed through its halls, quiet, unsure, but real. The staff began to relax around her again. She helped the gardener with new plantings, oversaw the kitchen's autumn preserves, even began playing piano in the evenings. There were still moments, shadows that crept in at night, dreams where she saw them together. But the ache had softened. Until one morning, the quiet was broken by the sound of wheels on the gravel drive. She was in the garden, pruning roses, when she heard the carriage stop. The butler hurried toward her, breathless. "Your Grace, he's here." Helena froze. "Who?" "The Duke, madam." The world stilled. Every part of her wanted to run, to hide behind the fragile peace she had built. But instead, she laid down the shears, wiped her hands, and straightened her posture. "Tell him he may wait in the drawing room," she said, her voice steady though her pulse thundered. "I will join him presently." As she walked back to the manor, the air seemed to tremble around her. Every step echoed with memory, of vows unspoken, of heartbreak unhealed. She paused before the mirror in the corridor, meeting her own reflection. Her cheeks were flushed from the sun, her eyes sharper than she remembered. There was sadness there still, yes, but also strength. She took a breath. "Let him see what he lost," she whispered. And with that, Helena entered the room where her past, and perhaps her future, waited. The moment she stepped into the drawing room, the air changed. He was there, standing by the window as though the weight of the morning could not quite find him. The Duke of Ashbourne, Adrian, her husband in name, her stranger in truth. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, gilding the dust that hung between them. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, slowly, as though afraid she might vanish if he moved too quickly. "Helena." Her name on his lips still had the power to undo her breath, but she did not let it show. "Your Grace," she said evenly. "You honor Rosefield with your presence. I was not aware you were coming." He studied her. The composed stillness, the lifted chin, the guarded eyes that once looked at him with warmth. "I did not send word," he admitted. "You would not have agreed to see me." "You assume correctly." She moved past him toward the hearth, every step measured. "Why are you here?" "To apologize." She laughed softly, not with amusement, but disbelief. A curious word that, so easily said, so rarely meant. "I mean it," he said, his voice low. "Every word of it." She turned to face him. "Then say it, properly, as one might confess before the gallows." He took a step closer, not too near, but enough that she could see the shadows beneath his eyes. He looked older, wearier. The confidence that once clung to him like perfume had faded, leaving something raw and human behind. "I wronged you," he said. "I humiliated you in the eyes of all London. You deserved devotion, not doubt. I cannot change what happened, but I can tell you the truth of it." "The truth," she repeated, voice brittle. "Now, after everything?" "Yes, because I owe you that, even if you never forgive me." She said nothing, only nodded once, tightly. He drew in a breath. "That morning, your sister came to me. She said she wished to speak privately, about you. I was a fool to allow it. She wept, claimed she could not bear to lose her sister to duty. that her heart... Helena's throat tightened. Stop. But he continued, quietly, brokenly. She kissed me, Helena. And I did not stop her quickly enough. It was over in a breath, but it was enough. Enough to destroy us both. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. I saw, she whispered. Do you know what it is to watch your life crumble and not make a sound? His eyes closed briefly. Every night since. The silence stretched between them, heavy, dangerous. Outside, the wind stirred the curtains, whispering through the cracks like ghosts. Helena turned away first. She walked to the piano, untouched since her arrival, and traced her fingers over the keys. You should have come sooner, she said softly. You should have said this before I buried my hope. I was ashamed, he said, and I thought distance would spare you further pain. Distance doesn't heal what silence infects. That made him flinch. When she faced him again, her eyes gleamed with unshed tears. Do you think I married you for status, for comfort? I married you because I believed you saw me, not the daughter of a failing house, not a pawn in your duty. Me. I did see you, he said, his voice trembling now. And I still do. God help me, Helena. I see you everywhere. She drew a breath, unsteady. Then why does it still hurt? He stepped closer, one cautious pace, then another. Because I have not yet earned the right to ease that pain. The words broke something inside her. For the first time, she saw him not as the Duke, the man polished by privilege, but as Adrian, flawed, regretful, stripped of the armor of title and charm. And she hated that her heart still remembered how to ache for him. Go back to London, she said quietly. Your world needs its Duke. My world needs silence. I cannot, he said simply. She looked up sharply. You cannot. I've left the city, he said. At least for now. The council has turned cold, the Tun whispers. And your sister. Don't. Her tone cut through the air. Do not say her name here. He nodded once. Then I won't. But you should know. I spoke her name only to defend yours. She has fled to Bath. I made it clear she would not be welcome in my house again. Her breath caught. You did that? Yes. Why? Because I could not bear one more day of allowing falsehood to win. For a long moment, neither spoke. The clock ticked softly, each sound measuring the distance between what they were and what they might have been. Then, finally, Helena said, You speak as though you've changed. He met her gaze. Perhaps I have. Or perhaps I'm only now becoming the man I should have been when I married you. A quiet, wounded laugh escaped her. You married me for convenience, Adrian. Let us not gild it. I married you for peace, he said, but I found none without you. The fire crackled behind her. She looked at him, and for a moment, a dangerous, fleeting moment, she saw the man she had fallen for in candlelight, the one who had touched her hand at the opera and said, You look as though you belong to no one, not even your fear. That memory stung now. Helena, he said softly, let me make amends. Let me prove. She shook her head. No words can undo what your silence did. He took another step closer, voice breaking. Then let my actions speak. Actions? She whispered. You think tending an estate or defending my name is enough? I think love deserves to fight for its second chance. Something inside her trembled, something she didn't want to name. She turned away before he could see it. Leave me, she said, her tone cool once more. Please. He hesitated. If that's what you truly wish. It is. But as he moved toward the door, the truth in her chest screamed the opposite. When it closed behind him, the silence fell heavy again. Helena pressed her palms against her eyes, her breath coming fast. Why did his presence still stir her so deeply? Why did regret feel like longing dressed in grief? That night, she could not sleep. The letter he had burned in her mind played again. The way his voice had faltered when he said her name. The way guilt had softened him into something almost tender. By morning, she found herself restless. She went to the stables again, the same path, the same crisp air. But halfway through her ride, she saw him. Adrian, standing by the riverbank, his coat unbuttoned, his horse tied beside him, as if fate had drawn their paths together once more. She froze. He turned, as though he had known she would come. "Helena, you followed me. I hoped you'd return here. It's where we first rode together after the betrothal, isn't it?" She remembered. The same bend in the river, the same sunrise. Back then, his laughter had filled the air. Now, only silence lingered. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Not forgiveness," he said. "Only the chance to try again. Without deceit, without pretense. You ask too much. I ask for what I failed to protect." Their eyes locked. The space between them seemed alive, a pulse of memory and unspoken want. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain and earth and him. She swallowed. "And if I refuse? Then I'll go," he said quietly. "But I'll go knowing I told you the truth, that every moment without you has been a kind of exile." Helena's heart twisted painfully. Exile. That was what they both were. Two souls wandering the ruins of their choices. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "I once thought love was possession," he said. "That to have you meant to hold you. I was wrong. To love you is to guard your freedom, even from my own selfishness." Tears stung her eyes. "And what if I can never trust you again?" He hesitated, then said, "Then I will spend my life earning what I squandered in a single moment." She looked at him, and for the first time since the betrayal, she believed him, or wanted to. But wanting was dangerous. "Go," she whispered, voice breaking, "before I forget what you did." He nodded, once, solemnly, and mounted his horse. As he turned to leave, he said, "I will not ask for your heart, Helena. Only your permission to hope." Then he rode away, disappearing into the mist. Helena stood by the river long after, the water glinting like tears beneath the pale light. Hope, she thought bitterly. What a cruel, beautiful thing to leave behind. Yet as she walked back toward the manor, something fragile stirred inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a spark. Because for the first time since her wedding day, her heart no longer felt entirely broken. It felt alive. Part 6. The glass shattered before she realized she'd dropped it. Crimson wine bled across the marble, a dark mirror of her pulse. Furious, frantic, alive despite everything she wished dead inside. Helena pressed a trembling hand against her ribs as if she could cage her own heart. The echo of footsteps down the corridor made her flinch. She knew that gate too well. The Duke, Adrian, the man who had once sworn his vows with lips still tasting of her sister's deceit. "Helena!" His voice broke the silence, soft but hoarse. "Don't," she said, the single word slicing through the air. She turned, the candlelight catching in her eyes, making them look almost fevered. "Not tonight." He paused in the doorway. Rain slicked his hair to his brow. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside her chest. "I have to," he said. "You've avoided me for 3 days. I can't breathe knowing I did this to you, and you won't even—" "Breathe?" She laughed, brittle and sharp. "You breathe just fine, Your Grace. You've always known how to survive the wreckage you cause." He stepped closer, slowly, as though approaching a wounded creature that might bolt. "You think I'm unhurt by it? That night haunts me. She raised her hand. "Don't give me another excuse. You loved her. You might still love her. And I was the convenient choice to salvage the family's honor." The words tasted like ash, but once spoken, they freed something knotted in her throat. Adrian's jaw tightened. Convenient? You think I ever wanted this farce? Farce? Her laughter turned to tears before she could stop it. Then why continue the performance? Why play the devoted husband before the ton while I turn to ice beside you? He didn't answer. Instead, he crossed the last distance between them and caught her wrists, not in anger, but in desperation. Because if I stop pretending, Helena, I will lose you entirely. The confession stopped her breath. He lowered his forehead to her hands, voice breaking. I don't love her. I never did. I thought I did because she sparkled, because she was easy, reckless, everything I wasn't allowed to be. But you? His fingers trembled. You are the quiet that keeps me sane. Helena's heart slammed once, hard. She wanted to believe him. Heaven help her, she did. But the image of her wedding morning, the kiss, the betrayal, rose like smoke between them. Words, she whispered. That's all they've ever been. Adrian looked up, eyes raw. Then let me prove it. She drew back, shaking her head. Don't. Not like this. He released her, and the loss of warmth felt like being thrown into winter. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, thunder cracked. Helena, he said quietly. When your sister wrote me, it wasn't to lure me. It was to destroy you. She said you'd refuse to support her marriage prospects, that you mocked her. I was angry, blind. She wanted me humiliated as you watched. Helena froze. You're saying she planned it? Yes. His gaze didn't waver. She knew I'd come to you. She wanted you to see us. It was her revenge. Her knees weakened. She sank into the nearest chair. The room tilted. Why tell me now? Because you deserve the truth, even if it damns me. She looked at him, seeing not the proud duke, but the weary man beneath, the one who carried guilt like armor. And somewhere in her chest, something fractured and reformed, painfully slow. I should hate you, she said softly. I'd understand. But I don't. He flinched as if struck. Then what? I pity you. For letting her use you. For letting me marry a ghost of a man still shackled to shame. Adrian knelt before her, ignoring the puddle of spilled wine that seeped into his trousers. Then let me make it right. Not as a duke. As a man who wants to be worthy again. She studied him, this proud creature on his knees, and saw sincerity where arrogance once lived. Slowly, she reached out, her fingertips brushing the wet hair from his brow. Worthiness isn't granted, she murmured. It's proven. He caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. The gesture undid her. I'll prove it, he said against her skin. Every day if I must. Silence followed, thick, trembling, not yet peace but no longer war. The storm raged outside, rain lashing the windows, but within those four walls, something gentler began to stir. Helena rose, and he stood with her, their eyes locked. Do you trust me enough to walk with me? He asked. I don't know, she said honestly. But perhaps I can try. He nodded once. That's all I ask. They left the drawing room together. The corridor was dim, lined with portraits that watched like silent witnesses. He led her toward the conservatory, her sanctuary, the place she had avoided since the wedding. The scent of damp earth met them. The glass panes glistened with raindrops like tears. I used to come here when I couldn't breathe, she said quietly. I know, he replied. I found your sketchbook once. I saw how you drew light even when you couldn't find it. She turned sharply. You went through my things? I was desperate to understand you, he admitted. To know the woman behind the mask I helped build. Something in his tone softened her again. And did you? He smiled faintly. I'm learning. For a long time, they stood among the roses, the air thick with the scent of wet petals. Words failed them, so they let silence speak. Then, slowly, almost hesitantly, he reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I can't erase what happened," he said, "but I can choose what happens next." Helena met his gaze. "And what would you choose?" "You," he said simply. "If you'll have me." The rawness in his voice cracked something deep within her. She wanted to stay angry, to keep the armor on, but it slipped away like a cloak too heavy to wear. "Adrian." She hesitated. "I want to believe you. But belief isn't love. Not yet." He nodded, accepting it like a vow. "Then I'll wait." A flicker of warmth bloomed where cold had long reigned. She drew a breath, the first easy one in days. "Come morning," she said, "London will whisper that the Duke and Duchess are still estranged." "Then let them whisper," he murmured. "They'll tire before I do." A laugh, small, broken, but real, escaped her. He stepped closer, his hand rising to her cheek. The touch was careful, reverent. She closed her eyes, letting herself lean into it for the briefest second. When she opened them, he was watching her as though she were a miracle he didn't deserve. "You should go," she whispered, "before I forget why I'm still angry." He smiled, not triumphant, but grateful. "Then I'll count tonight as progress." He turned to leave, but she caught his sleeve. "Adrian." He paused. "Don't make promises you can't keep," she said. "I've had enough of those." "I won't," he answered. "Not again." When he was gone, the conservatory seemed emptier, yet lighter somehow. The rain eased to a soft drizzle. Helena sank onto the stone bench, her fingers tracing the veins of a rose petal. It was torn at the edge, but still beautiful, still alive. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps she was too. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the marble floors like forgiveness. Servants whispered as she descended the staircase, her composure immaculate once more. But inside, something had changed. The cold that once numbed her had thawed. She found Adrian in the library, already dressed for court, his expression unreadable until he saw her. Then the faintest smile, tentative, uncertain, human, crossed his lips. "Good morning, Duchess." She inclined her head. "Good morning, Your Grace." A heartbeat of silence passed, thick with unspoken things. Then she added, almost gently, "You may walk with me if you wish." His surprise flickered before he masked it with grace. "I would be honored." They walked the corridor together, side by side, but not yet hand in hand. Servants bowed, curtains swayed. The world seemed to hold its breath. Helena's inner voice whispered that forgiveness was dangerous, that it invited pain. But as sunlight warmed her face, she found herself no longer afraid of the light. Perhaps love, real love, did not arrive like thunder after all. Perhaps it crept in quietly, like dawn, soft, uncertain, but impossible to stop. And though she could not yet say the words aloud, her heart, traitorous thing, whispered them anyway. I am learning too. Part 7. The heart returns home. Rain hammered the carriage roof like a furious heartbeat. Every drop echoed the storm inside Helena's chest. She hadn't wept since she left Ashbourne, but as the wheels ground to a stop before her childhood home, she felt the tears threaten at last. The Fairbourne estate, once proud, now sagged under years of neglect. The ivy had overrun the windows. The gravel path was half swallowed by weeds. Yet, when the butler opened the door, she caught the familiar scent of sandalwood and ink. Her father's study unchanged. He was frailer now, his eyes dim but kind. "My darling girl," he whispered as she knelt by his chair. "You shouldn't have come back." "I had nowhere else to go." The words broke from her before she could swallow them. He said nothing, just brushed a strand of damp hair from her cheek and sighed. "Your heart is too loyal, Helena. That has always been your gift, and your curse." Later that night, she stood by the window, the storm fading into mist. She traced a trembling finger along the cold glass, watching the road disappear into fog. Somewhere beyond that fog was Adrian. She told herself she would not think of him. She failed miserably. The door creaked. She turned and froze. He stood in the doorway, drenched from rain, his cloak heavy with mud and regret. Adrian. Her voice was barely breath. He removed his gloves slowly, as if unsure whether he had the right to still move within her world. "You left," he said quietly, "and I deserved that." Her throat tightened. "You let them destroy me. You let them call me names I never earned." "I know." His eyes were hollow, haunted. "And I will spend the rest of my life undoing it." He took one hesitant step forward, then another, until the distance between them was filled with everything they had never said. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "If the Ton discovers, they already have." That stopped her breath. "I denounced Lillian in front of the Duke's council," he continued, voice rough. "I told them every cruel word they whispered about you was a lie. I told them I was the fool who betrayed his own wife and didn't deserve her grace." Her hand covered her mouth. "Adrian, I've lost most of my allies. Half my estates may be seized by spring, and I couldn't care less, because none of it matters if you're not beside me." The words fell between them like fire. Helena stepped back, tears burning behind her eyes. "Why now? Why come back only when you've lost everything?" He gave a broken laugh. "Because that's when I realized what mattered. When all the noise was gone, there was only you." The storm outside had turned soft, a silver drizzle tapping against the window. She wanted to turn away, to stay angry, to remember every cruel whisper, every lonely night. But then he reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in velvet. He placed it on the table and unwrapped it carefully. A locket. Inside was her mother's portrait and a lock of Helena's hair from their wedding morning. "I kept it," he said, voice hoarse, "even when I couldn't bear to look at it." Her chest ached. "You think a trinket will fix what you broke?" "No," he said simply. "But it's a start." Silence stretched. Thick, trembling, electric. She could hear his breathing, ragged from travel. She could smell the rain still clinging to his coat, the faint scent of sandalwood and musk she once thought she'd never breathe again. And then, as if drawn by something stronger than reason, she moved toward him. "Do you even know what you're asking?" she whispered. "Yes." His gaze didn't waver. "To begin again. To love you the way I should have from the start. Love isn't a command, Adrian. It's not earned through words. I know. That's why I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking for your permission, to prove I'm no longer the man who hurt you." Her resolve faltered. His eyes were not the eyes of a proud duke now, but of a man stripped bare. She could feel the years of distance trembling between them. Anger, grief, desire, love, all tangled into something too human to name. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. "Helena," he murmured, voice shaking. "If I could undo it all—" "You can't," she interrupted softly. "But maybe we can start from what remains." He exhaled, a sound halfway between a sigh and a prayer. "Then let that be enough." For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them hummed like the seconds before thunder. Then he brushed his thumb along her jaw. The touch was hesitant, reverent. Her breath hitched. "Don't," she whispered, though her body leaned closer. "I can't stop," he confessed. "Not anymore." And when his lips found hers, it wasn't fire. It was recognition. The kind that comes after pain, when all the walls finally collapse. The kiss deepened, slow and desperate, a confession without words. Her fingers clutched his coat, dragging him closer until the world outside vanished. Somewhere in the storm's hush, she felt his forehead press against hers. "You're my home," he whispered. Her tears finally fell. "Then stay." The fire burned low as they sank into the stillness, his arms around her, the rain a soft percussion beyond the window. The ache didn't vanish, but it eased, piece by piece, replaced by something quieter, truer. Fade to black. When she woke, dawn spilled across the room. Adrian sat at the edge of the bed, still clothed, watching her with the solemn tenderness of a man who couldn't believe his luck. "I thought you'd leave before morning," she said, voice hoarse. He smiled faintly. "I did too. But then you sighed in your sleep and I decided I'd rather face the whole of London's wrath than miss that sound again." She bit her lip, laughter trembling through her tears. "Don't say such things," she murmured. "They're true." He stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the fog. "They'll be waiting for us, you know. The whispers, the ridicule." "I know," she said softly. "But they'll have to look me in the eye this time." He turned, pride softening his face. "You've always been stronger than me." "Not stronger," she corrected. "Just more tired of pretending." For a heartbeat, they simply stared at one another. Two people who had broken and rebuilt themselves in the same breath. Finally, she rose and took his hand. "Then let's go face them," she said. "Together." He kissed her knuckles, the gesture reverent. "As you command, Duchess." Outside, the rain had stopped. The first light of morning stretched across the road that would lead them back to London. Back to scandal. Back to redemption. Back to love. Part 8. Helena's Triumph and Public Reckoning. The moment the carriage drew up before the grand ballroom of Ashbourne Estate, Helena's heart hammered, not with excitement, but with the weight of inevitability. The ton had gathered, their eyes sharp and whispers sharper, hungry for scandal, ripe with judgment. Every glimmering candle reflected 1,000 gazes, and yet, beneath the heavy chandeliers, she felt utterly exposed. She stepped forward, her gloved hand tight around the edge of her cloak, a tremor threatening to betray her composure. The letter Lillian had left behind still burned in her mind. "He never loved me. It was always her." Words meant for no one but the Duke. Yet now, she would make them echo across every gilded corner of this hall. Adrian was there, standing near the grand piano, jaw tight, eyes fixed on her. Not with disdain, nor regret, but with that quiet, steady reverence that had slowly replaced the betrayal she had once thought permanent. He had known this day would come, the day when the truth could no longer hide behind whispered lies and silk gowns. Helena felt her pulse shift from fear to resolve. She would not let this moment pass in silence. She lifted her chin, shoulders straight, and crossed the hall, her heels clicking like the tolling of judgment upon the ears of the gossiping ton. The air was thick with perfume and tension, but she drew it all in, inhaled, and held it as though she could turn it into armor. Moments later, Lillian appeared, radiant in a dress that had cost a fortune, her eyes darting nervously, betraying a flicker of desperation. She caught Helena's gaze and faltered, her perfect mask cracking. The room leaned in collectively, as if sensing the battle that would unfold not with duels or whispers, but with truth laid bare. "Ladies and gentlemen," Helena's voice, soft but firm, carried through the space, drawing every eye. "It seems society has been kept waiting for clarity." Her hand lifted slightly, as if presenting herself not as a victim, but as the fulcrum upon which scandal would pivot. The hall was silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Adrian stepped forward then, every inch the Duke the world feared and admired, yet different, stripped of pretense, his gaze unflinching. "Helena," he said, voice low but strong. "The truth belongs to her, to no one else." A murmur swept the room. Lillian's lips parted, a gasp almost drowned in the rustle of silk. The servants and guests alike froze. The gossip column's whispers momentarily caught in their throats. Adrian's declaration was more than loyalty. It was defiance. Social expectation, family manipulation, and past misdeeds all shrank before it. Helena's chest swelled, not with pride, but with something older, deeper. Relief, recognition, power reclaimed. "I will not allow deceit to govern my life," she said, voice now steady and commanding. "The choices I make are mine alone, and I choose dignity, honesty, and love." Even as she spoke, Adrian's presence anchored her. No longer the betrayer of whispered corridors and stolen glances, he had become her partner in this reclaiming of truth. His hand brushed hers lightly, a promise, a tether, a quiet surrender. It was enough to make the world spin, enough to make her knees forget the weight of their heels. Lillian's voice trembled. He never loved me," she admitted aloud, every syllable breaking a spell that had long haunted Helena. "It was always her." The words struck the room with the force of revelation, scattering disbelief, admiration, and shock alike. The ton leaned forward, eyes wide, scandal forgotten in the gravity of honesty. Helena felt a strange warmth rise through her chest. She had expected anger, or triumph, or even vindictive satisfaction, but instead there was only clarity. Every whispered doubt, every moment of humiliation, every shadowed corridor in which Adrian's betrayal had once stung, now folded into the tapestry of her strength. She was whole again, not because the Duke had claimed her, but because she had claimed herself. Adrian's hand found hers fully now, fingers lacing with hers as if the world had narrowed to this single axis of truth and devotion. "You've always been remarkable," he murmured, voice trembling slightly. "I was a fool to wait so long to see it." Helena allowed herself a slow, deliberate smile, the kind that reached her eyes and warmed even the most judgmental onlookers. "It is not too late for lessons," she replied, almost teasingly, though her heart thudded beneath the silk of her bodice, "and it is certainly not too late for love." The room exhaled collectively. Murmurs resumed, softer now, tinged with awe rather than malice. The Duke of Ashbourne had publicly declared loyalty to his Duchess, not the sister, not society's expectation, but to her. It was a rare spectacle, and Helena felt it vibrate through every fiber of her being. Adrian bent slightly, his forehead brushing hers, a stolen intimacy permitted only by the truth they now shared openly. No further words were needed. The intimacy of acknowledgement, of mutual respect and desire tempered by time and suffering, was sufficient. It was a quiet, honorable surrender, the kind of connection that did not scandalize but redeemed. Helena turned her gaze outward again, taking in the assembly with a newfound authority. She recognized many faces, the ones who had whispered, judged, and watched, and she understood that their gaze now carried a different weight. They saw not a broken bride or a scorned sister, but a woman who had reclaimed her story, her choices, and her dignity. The music from the grand piano shifted, a waltz beginning as if choreographed for this very unveiling. Guests looked toward the dance floor with hesitant awe, some even stepping aside to give them space. Adrian extended his hand, formal and yet intimate, and Helena placed hers within it. Together, they moved onto the polished floor, steps measured, hearts aligned. The room was no longer a court of judgment. It was a testament to resilience, love, and triumph. As they glided across the floor, Helena reflected on the journey, the whispered betrayals, the private tears, the lonely nights in echoing halls. Each had been a crucible, shaping her into someone unrecognizable from the girl who had overheard Adrian's confession to Lillian months before. And yet, the transformation had been gentle in its inevitability. She was herself now, entirely in control of the narrative. Moments later, the final act of the evening unfolded. Lillian, humbled and chastened by her own actions, approached quietly, bowing her head to Helena. "I was wrong," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but enough to carry the weight of sincere remorse. "You deserved everything I tried to take." Helena inclined her head, accepting the apology with grace. Forgiveness, she realized, was a luxury only the strong could afford, and she was stronger than she had ever known. Adrian squeezed her hand gently. "Shall we?" he asked, and Helena nodded, leaning slightly into him as if the closeness of his presence could heal all remaining wounds. They moved together across the room, no longer a duchess in name only, no longer a bride shadowed by betrayal, but a woman fully embraced by love earned, loyalty proven, and a future reclaimed. The ton watched, many in quiet envy, others in awe. The whispers returned, softer now, tinged with admiration. The Ice Duchess melts at last, and the Duke learns devotion. Helena held her head high, letting every gaze affirm what she had long suspected, that her worth was never defined by the affections of others, but by her own strength and capacity to love despite everything. The candles flickered, catching in Adrian's eyes, and Helena realized something extraordinary. This moment, so public and so vulnerable, was hers in every sense. No whispered lies, no stolen glances, no scandal could touch her here. She had reclaimed herself, and in doing so, had claimed a love that was both tender and resolute. As the final notes of the waltz echoed through the hall, Helena's mind floated to a simple truth. Love, when earned and chosen, could heal even the deepest betrayal. She glanced at Adrian, feeling the unspoken promise between them. Loyalty, respect, and passion, tempered by shared struggle. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a full exhale, letting the tension leave her body, letting the warmth settle in her chest. The crowd's eyes followed them, yet Helena was oblivious to judgment now. She felt only the music, the movement, the steady pulse of Adrian's hand in hers, and the certainty that she had survived, endured, and triumphed. This was her moment, not just as a duchess, but as Helena, fully herself, fully alive, fully in love. Chapter 9. Helena stood on the balcony of Ashbourne Estate, the early morning mist curling around the manicured gardens like a silken veil. The estate, once cold and echoing with the weight of unspoken words, now felt alive with possibility. Sunlight caught the dew on the hedges, turning each droplet into a tiny jewel, and for the first time in months, Helena allowed herself to breathe fully, without hesitation, without fear, without the shadow of betrayal pressing down on her heart. She adjusted the folds of her gown, letting the pale blue silk brush softly against her fingertips, and allowed her mind to drift back across the years she had endured. Every whispered betrayal, every stolen glance, every lonely night spent walking the echoing halls of Ashbourne had led her here. She was no longer the girl who had overheard Adrian confess his love for Lillian in the corridors of her family home. She was Helena Ashbourne now, a woman who had reclaimed her dignity, her choices, and her heart. Behind her, the faint rustle of footsteps brought her back to the present. Adrian emerged from the drawing room, dressed not just as the Duke, but as a man who had learned humility, respect, and devotion through fire and remorse. His eyes found hers instantly, steady and warm, and Helena felt the familiar stir of something she had long denied herself. Hope, yes, but also a quiet, enduring love. "You're up early," she said softly, a teasing note threading through her voice despite the weight of the morning's solemnity. "I wanted to see the estate in the morning light," Adrian replied, moving closer, each step measured, deliberate. "But truthfully, I wanted to see you. The sun has nothing on your presence." His words were simple, but the sincerity in his gaze struck her more deeply than any grandiose declaration ever could. Helena allowed herself a small smile, the kind that touched her eyes and reached to the depth of her soul. "Flattery still suits you poorly," she said, though her pulse quickened at the way he stood near her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Adrian's lips curved in a faint, self-deprecating smile. I have learned, after many errors, that words matter less than actions. You deserved every ounce of loyalty I delayed giving, and I will spend the rest of my life making amends through consistency. The sincerity in his tone, the humility, the unspoken remorse, it all resonated with Helena. For so long, she had feared love, feared disappointment, feared that the tender threads of connection could never be repaired once broken. And yet, here he was, present and unwavering, asking not for forgiveness as a transaction, but for the privilege of walking forward with her, side by side. Helena inhaled, letting the cool morning air fill her lungs. "We have both endured much," she said finally, her voice steady, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had survived storms and emerged stronger. "And yet we remain, not as victims, but as people capable of choosing how to love and live. That is something I intend to honor." Adrian's hand brushed against hers, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as Helena allowed the touch. No grand gestures, no overly dramatic vows, just a shared, steady connection that spoke of trust rebuilt, hearts mended, and lives aligned. The intimacy was subtle, restrained, and entirely appropriate for the morning light, yet it carried a weight far greater than words ever could. "Shall we walk the gardens?" Adrian asked, his tone casual but laced with warmth. Helena nodded. Together, they descended the marble steps, their movements synchronized as though they had been walking this path all their lives. The gardens were alive with blooms, the roses that had once symbolized her frozen heart now vibrant and fragrant, mirrors of the renewal she felt within herself. Birds called in the distance. The faint ripple of the estate's fountain provided a rhythmic undertone, and Helena allowed herself to drink it all in. The peace, the beauty, the subtle electricity of being seen and cherished by the man who had once been a source of pain. As they strolled, the estate staff emerged to greet them, their faces bright with genuine affection and respect. Helena smiled at each familiar servant, remembering nights spent managing the household, nights of quiet resilience when she had carried the weight of scandal and social expectation alone. Their loyalty, their quiet admiration, was a testament to the authority she now wielded, not through fear or intimidation, but through dignity and competence. "I see the gardens flourish," Adrian remarked, glancing at the roses in particular, "much like the woman walking beside me." His voice carried the familiar teasing edge, but the warmth behind it was undeniable. Helena's lips curved upward, a soft laugh escaping her. "Careful, my lord," she replied. "Your flattery will one day make me believe you never erred." Adrian laughed softly, a sound she realized she had missed far more than she would have admitted. "Perhaps it is a risk worth taking," he said, his gaze locking with hers. "Every day I am with you, I learn the worth of patience, the value of seeing beyond first impressions, and the power of truly knowing someone." Helena's heart stirred, a delicate warmth spreading through her chest. It was a far cry from the intense ache of betrayal she had felt months ago. Now, love felt steady, grounded in truth, and anchored in mutual respect. It was the kind of love that did not scorch, but illuminated. They paused near the fountain, the sun breaking through clouds to scatter light across the water, turning each ripple into gold. Adrian's hand found hers fully now, fingers entwining naturally, without hesitation. The gesture, simple as it was, spoke volumes: loyalty, protection, devotion. "You taught me, Helena," Adrian said, voice low, intimate, "that love is not possession. It is not demand or expectation or convenience. It is choosing someone every day, despite everything that could pull us apart. You have shown me that." Helena's gaze softened, her pulse quickening not with fear, but with quiet joy. "And you have taught me," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "that even the most broken trust can be mended if both hearts are willing." A gentle breeze carried the scent of roses and freshly turned soil, and for a moment, the world felt suspended between what had been and what would be. The ghosts of the past, betrayal, heartbreak, whispered rumors, hovered faintly at the edges, yet Helena felt no fear. She had walked through fire and frost and emerged stronger, more resilient, more herself than ever before. Adrian leaned slightly closer, his forehead brushing hers, a restrained intimacy that spoke of respect as much as desire. "Together," he whispered, "we will face whatever comes, and I will always stand by your side, come what may." Helena's hand tightened around his. "Together," she echoed, a solemn vow woven with love and strength. The estate bells tolled in the distance, marking the passage of morning into day. Guests, friends, and society figures had begun arriving for the day's events. The first grand ball she would host as Duchess, a celebration not of titles alone, but of love regained and dignity affirmed. Helena straightened, taking in the sunlight glinting off Adrian's coat, the vibrant hues of the gardens, the polished marble of the estate's grand hall. In that moment, she realized something extraordinary. Life was not measured by what had been stolen or lost, but by what was reclaimed and nurtured. She had survived deception, endured humiliation, and faced heartbreak, yet here she stood, not as a victim, not as a shadow, but as a woman fully realized, fully loved, fully free. Adrian offered his arm, and Helena accepted, the simple gesture a testament to the trust and partnership they had painstakingly rebuilt. Together, they walked back toward the estate, the sun illuminating their path, casting long golden shadows behind them, a metaphor for the past that had shaped them but would not define them. Inside the estate, the staff bustled, preparations for the ball in full swing. The room smelled of polished wood, fresh flowers, and faint traces of candle wax, homely and grand, familiar yet vibrant. Helena moved with confidence, her steps sure, her demeanor commanding yet graceful. Every glance from the arriving guests, every whispered compliment, reinforced her sense of self-worth, her place in the world, and the hard-won respect she now commanded. As the first guests entered, Helena noticed Adrian subtly guiding the interactions, offering polite bows, warm smiles, and quiet reassurances to those unsure of protocol. It was the perfect balance of nobility and humanity, of duty and heart. She felt a swell of admiration and gratitude, knowing they had navigated stormy waters together and emerged stronger for it. The orchestra began a soft prelude, and guests were ushered toward the dance floor. Helena turned to Adrian, her eyes sparkling with a mix of anticipation and delight. "Shall we?" she asked, a playful challenge lingering in her tone. Adrian extended his hand, fingers brushing hers in the familiar, steady connection they had cultivated over months of trials and triumphs. "Always," he said, his voice low but resolute. As they glided across the polished floor, the chandeliers catching their reflections and scattering light like stars, Helena felt a profound sense of peace. The room faded away, leaving only the rhythm of the music, the warmth of Adrian's hand, and the certainty that love, earned through patience and integrity, could indeed heal even the deepest wounds. Lillian, seated at the edge of the ballroom, watched silently. Her eyes were filled with reflection and quiet remorse, but Helena's forgiveness, granted silently through her composure and radiant presence, spoke louder than any words could. Lillian's chapter in this story had closed, leaving Helena to step fully into her own. Adrian leaned slightly closer, voice just above a whisper. "You have changed the world, Helena, and my heart along with it." Helena smiled softly, pressing her hand against his. And you, Adrian, have shown me that redemption is possible, even for the hardest of hearts. They moved together, the world spinning lightly around them, anchored in trust, loyalty, and the enduring power of love. Every glance, every step, every subtle touch reinforced the promise they had made, to face life's uncertainties together, to honor each other's strengths, and to cherish the love that had been fought for and won. As the final notes of the prelude faded and the first real dance began, Helena allowed herself to fully surrender, not in weakness, but in triumph. She was no longer defined by what had been stolen or threatened, but by what she had reclaimed: her dignity, her heart, and the man who had learned through patience and love to honor both. The estate, alive with light, laughter, and music, became a reflection of her inner world, vibrant, full, and unafraid. Every glance she shared with Adrian was a reaffirmation that they had endured, grown, and now flourished together. The past remained a shadow only to highlight the brilliance of the present, and the promise of the future gleamed like the morning sun on the gardens they had walked just moments ago. Helena knew, with quiet certainty, that she would face whatever came next with courage and grace. She had survived betrayal, scandal, and heartbreak, and emerged not just intact, but radiant. Beside her, Adrian offered steady companionship and unwavering devotion, and together, they had rewritten their story. Not as one of convenience or loss, but of love reclaimed, trust rebuilt, and hearts united. As the first dance carried them through the golden light of the grand ballroom, Helena whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else, This is what freedom feels like." And in the warmth of Adrian's hand, the steady rhythm of the orchestra, and the glittering reflections of candlelight, she knew it to be true. Life awaited, bright and uncharted, and Helena Ashbourne, Duchess in every sense of the word, was ready to embrace it fully.